All right, step 10 of the basic buyer's guide. This is financing, appraisal, and title. So we're going to start by talking about financing. So at this point, you're either in the middle of this kind of runs simultaneously with your inspection period. So um, this is happening in line with that. Generally, your home inspection happens real early as you can have it is ideal, and then so you're early in the mortgage phase, so it feels maybe this is a little bit heavier, a little bit later. It depends on how your schedule runs, but it can go in line with your inspection contingency period. But we're going to talk about appraisals, we're going to talk about title, so let's get into it. Financing, one thing to tell your buyers if you haven't, the local lenders that I work with tell them this probably 5 different times, and it's probably in every single email that they get from the lender, and that is, do not make any big purchases. Um, basically, the thought is if you can't eat it, don't buy it while you're under contract to purchase a home. Wait to buy your appliances. Do not buy a new car. Believe it or not, it still happens. I still have phone calls from agents. My buyer just bought a car and the deal is going to fall apart. Don't do it. Make sure you tell your buyers not to. It happens. Anything that they're going to buy like that they think they must buy, consult with the lender first. To tell the buyer, consult with the lender first. And the big thing is always, as always, ask before you go and do something. No harm in asking. Um, the buyer at this point is in communication with the lender. If you're through your inspections at this point, you're really kind of on the back burner. As the agent, we're just a firefighter. We're here to put out any fires that come up. We're here to make some phone calls or some emails if we're not getting a response from the lender, the title company, or the cooperating agent if needed. But for the most part, your buyer is in direct communication with the lender at this point, going through the hoops, uploading their pay stubs, uploading their mortgage stuff, doing what they need to do in order to get their mortgage working with the lender. The biggest thing to worry about at this point is the mortgage commitment due date. So that is in your contract here on page 3, this section right here talks about the mortgage and the mortgage commitment. So this date is important. It is a due date, and the mortgage commitment must be issued by the lender and sent over to the listing agent by this date. If not, you could get into an issue where the seller or the buyer try and terminate. So make sure that you have the mortgage commitment issued. Again, local lenders that I work with or that we work with all the time, they know how important this date is because they do a lot of deals in New Jersey. And they put this date on their calendar, and their processing team makes sure that they issue a mortgage commitment by that date. Very briefly, the mortgage commitment is a document. It is a PDF document, and on it, it states, congratulations, Mr. or Mr. Buyer, on your purchase of 123 Main Street. You are conditionally approved for your mortgage. We're issuing a commitment to give you the loan, to give you the mortgage. In order for you to get the mortgage, you need to complete the following conditions. Condition number 1, send a new bank statement. Condition number 2, provide clearance assurance that none of the judgments on title belong to you. Condition number 4, verification of employment, blah, blah, blah. And it could be 20 things, it could be 4 things. Depends on the buyer, depends on their situation, depends on their finances. So some lenders will not issue a commitment until they have like 19 of those things completed, and they'll miss this date because they don't go by this date. Generally, those are lenders that aren't from New Jersey. So just make sure that you're on top of that. Hey, we want, even if it's a crappy commitment, we don't want that, but we need something. We need that mortgage commitment PDF in order to satisfy this portion of the contract. And if we don't get it, we could run into some trouble. So make sure you get your commitment by the due date. Put it in your calendar. Make sure that you're in communication with the lender. This is where we're a firefighter here. Hopefully it's a non-issue and you don't even have to think about it. You see the commitment pop up in your email one day, the lender sends it to you and the listing agent, and you're done. You don't have to worry about it. So make sure you meet your commitment date. Other than that, again, buyers just kind of rolling along with the lender. They're going to keep asking them for stuff. The buyer's going to keep providing it. They're going to e-sign some documents, and you're just on the back burner. They might ask you some questions. You're going to direct them to the lender. I usually text or email or call my buyers once a week just to check in. If you have a 60-day close, after you're done your inspection period, there's a lag. I mean, we're not doing anything, or it might not feel like we're doing anything for our buyers during that time. We're out of the phase where we're necessarily talking to them every single day, and it could go a week. I have a new construction deal pending right now that unless I reach out to them, there's no reason for waiting for the home to be finished. Everything's done. So it's just kind of making sure that everything is done, staying in communication with everybody, and keeping the deal on track to close. So part of the financing portion of the deal is the appraisal. So jump into that real quick. So, and again, basics here, not getting too nitty gritty on it. The appraisal is a thing, we'll call it an event that is scheduled by the buyer through the lender. I'll word it like that. Usually what happens is the buyer does their initial mortgage application, and then they get an email from the lender saying, click here, and they put in their credit card info, and that initiates the appraisal being scheduled. It's like $400 or $500. Talk to me offline if your buyer can't afford that, wasn't expecting that. It's in when the lender gives the closing costs estimate, or when you're giving the closing cost estimate, that appraisal fee should be counted in there, but they are paying that up front along with their home inspection. So home inspection and appraisal, those are generally the only out-of-pocket expenses the buyer's paying prior to their settlement on the home. Unless there's an HOA, sometimes it can be a little bit different, but 99% of the time, appraisal and home inspection are the only two things your buyer pays out of pocket prior to settlement. Everything else is paid at the settlement table via one cashier's check, which we'll talk about in a later video, of course. So it's day 7, you've been under contract for 7 days, your home inspection is today, and the buyer gets an email saying, hey, you need to schedule the appraisal. And the buyer says, hey, Jim, I don't want to schedule my appraisal today because I don't want to pay for it. And then what if the inspection goes bad and I have to back out? So you might say as their agent, okay, well then just hold off. Our mortgage commitment's not due for another 20 days. We don't need to schedule this right now. Just wait to schedule your appraisal until we're through home inspection and you're satisfied with the results. Wrong. Don't do that. I'm telling you, don't do that. It happens all the time. However, technically the buyer needs to pursue their mortgage in good faith. The home inspection results should not be, I know that they are or can be, but they should not be tied to the appraisal. Your buyer must schedule that appraisal when it's appropriate, and don't have it in writing that you told your buyer over an email or text that you held up the appraisal because you're waiting for the results of the inspection. That is a breach of contract. It's not allowed. It's not in good faith. So don't do it. The appraiser is an actual person. When the appraisal gets scheduled through the lender then orders the appraisal through a third-party company where some person that we don't know and we do not have control over is going to get this order with the property address and the agreement of sale, and then they're going to schedule through the listing agent. Again, the appraisal is scheduled by the appraiser through the listing agent, not through you as the buyer's agent. The buyer does not attend. The buyer's agent almost always does not attend. Usually the listing agent attends, and the listing agent will generally bring a little folder with comparable sales and give it to the appraiser and try and justify the value that's on your contract. In this market, it gets a little goofy sometimes. Listing agents aren't going, or you're dealing with just a variety of issues, and appraisal's a big thing right now, right? So again, buyer does not attend. The listing agent generally attends. It should be their responsibility. If you know that your buyer is willing to pay $20,000 towards a low appraisal, you might want to be involved. You might want to be the one that goes there or talk to the listing agent about the comps before they go, because your buyer's money is on the line here directly. The first $20,000 in the low appraisal, if your buyer agreed to cover a certain portion of it, cover a gap, you might want to be more involved or go over there and make sure, that you're doing your best to get it to appraise. But ultimately, that responsibility is generally falling on the listing side, not the buyer side. Value and repairs. So the appraiser, again, human being, super busy. Your appraiser is going to be busier than you are, and this whole deal could be hinging on a 5 to 15 minute appraisal. This person is going to drive their car to the property. They're going to have the lockbox code that they got from the listing agent. They're going to walk up to the property, look around, take pictures, be as fast as they can. They don't want any interruptions, so they don't want the seller to be there if at all possible, usually, although it does help sometimes because the appraiser might ask questions to the seller, double-edged sword there. But again, since that falls on the listing side, we won't get too much into that. Appraiser's going to go there. They're going to be looking to make sure if it's a conventional loan, it's a little bit looser, I'll say. as far as the condition of the property. As long as it's generally livable, a conventional mortgage is not going to come attached with any repairs. It's just going to be about value. So if you're under contract for $250,000, the appraiser is going to go look at the house, take pictures, then go back and look in Bright MLS for comparable sales to try to justify the value of $250,000. The appraiser is generally not out to kill the deal. The appraiser will generally call the listing agent and say, hey, I can't walk me through how you came up with this price because I'm stuck here. I need help. Send me some comps so I can come up with a value where it's going to appraise low. And I say generally because the appraiser is a human being. Of course, there are appraisers out there that are in a bad mood, that had a bad day, that don't know how to, don't feel like spending the time to look up comps to justify a value. And unfortunately, there's nothing that we can do about it sometimes. The deal just hinges on the appraisal coming in at value and with no repairs. And if it comes in low or there's major repairs, you just have to deal with it. At that point, it becomes a negotiation, or it's already been negotiated if you did it up front as part of your offer, as a lot of buyers are doing right now. But if not, if it comes in low, generally it's a negotiation. The seller can reduce the sales price all the way down to the low appraised value. The buyer can cover the difference, or you can meet in the middle. In this market, a lot of sellers feel they're entitled to top dollar, and they're killing deals over low appraisals left and right. It just depends on the situation. So obviously, if that happens, talk to your coach, talk to somebody else, and fight to get the deal to close, because I hate seeing them die from a low appraisal. So if it does appraise low, you can do what's called a reconsideration of value, which I actually have another video on my channel for. So if it appraises low, watch the reconsideration of value video for how you can fight that. So difference between conventional and FHA, one of the major things that we talk about all the time, an FHA appraisal. A lot of people think that it's some separate home inspection thing happens for that. It's not the case. Okay, we had another video on the home inspection process of purchasing a home. Appraisal is independent from that, whether they're FHA, USDA, VA, conventional. Appraisal is separate from the home inspection. Home inspection, not mandatory. Recommended, not mandatory. Appraisal, mandatory. Cannot waive the appraisal in any circumstance where the buyer is getting a mortgage. Buyer does not have the choice of whether or not they want to have an appraisal. So if you're FHA, you're going to get an appraiser, a person that's going to go through the same process, drive up to the property, go up to the house. Only this time, the FHA appraiser has a long list of things that he or she is looking for in the house to meet minimum property standards. I forget the actual term. So they're going to be looking to see, is there chipping paint? Is there railings where there's supposed to be railings? Do the windows work? Are the outlets grounded? Is there a pressure relief valve on the water heater? A million things an FHA appraiser is going to look for. And those are part of the FHA appraised report. Now, again, it's a person. I've had deals that should have had things that have been called out by the FHA appraiser that we're banking on, like, hey, we know that the FHA appraiser is going to call out these three things, and they don't call any of them out. So I don't know. I mean, it's a person. Did that particular appraiser even go into the house or just look at it from the outside and look at the pictures? I don't know. So it's impossible to say exactly. People want to know. I want to know exactly today what the appraiser is going to put on the list. The only way to get that list is to have the appraiser, who you don't know who it's going to be, to have that person go out there and write the list. And you don't want to be poking them to get them to write a list. You just want to let them go and do their thing, hands off. Generally, it's not an issue. Again, they're not looking to kill the deal. Let's say that there's 3 or 4 repairs that need to be made: loose handrail, chipping paint, 2 other things. In order to close on the mortgage, those issues must be resolved prior to settlement. There are cases where you can escrow forward and do it after closing. You don't want to go that route. Rarely does that happen. 99% of the time, if there's chipping paint, somebody is scraping it off and repainting it prior to closing. And then the appraiser must go back out there and re-inspect and give the thumbs up on it prior to closing. So that's the general step. Have your appraisal, hope it comes in as is with no, at value as is, which would mean it came in right at your purchase price, and there's no repairs that are mandatory for FHA or for conventional or whatever, and then you can move on to closing. So during a deal, those are your big hurdles: home inspection and appraisal. If you get through a home inspection and appraisal, that's usually the point where I say schedule the moving truck, schedule the vans, as long as there's enough time. Sometimes we're closing so fast, these deals are like last minute. But if you have some time, now is really when we can say, take a deep breath and say, okay, we're almost at the finish line here. So the last part of this video is title. So title is another thing that happens in the background of a deal. It's not something that you're generally having talking to the title company every day. So in New Jersey, title is ordered by the buyer at the buyer's choice of title company. So we generally are using local South Jersey title companies. What they are doing is they're taking your buyer and the seller's social security information, their social security number, their date of birth, and they're running a title search on the property and on the buyers and potentially the sellers. And they're looking for a variety of things. They're looking for liens on the property. Is there an unpaid second mortgage that nobody knew about? Is there a mechanic's lien from a plumber that the seller didn't pay 10 years ago that's still on the property? Does the seller have a child support judgment against them? Or are they incarcerated? Do they have money due and owe something where they're attaching the lien to the house? Same thing for the buyer. Does the buyer have any? A common thing is, it's not common, but it does happen, and I'm just talking about it now because it just happened. Child support. Is there unpaid child support or alimony case against them? These things will need to be cleared up prior to the title company issuing clean title to your new buyer. And if they're not taken care of, it can be an issue and it can delay your closing at a minimum, or it can kill the deal if something major comes up. So it's generally not an issue. Most of the time, you don't even know title insurance is something that's happening. It just kind of happens, and you see the emails go back and forth because, again, we're on the back burner at that time. Educate yourself as you're doing more deals on exactly what the title company is asking for, because it is the same every time. But generally what happens is buyer's title company pulls title and issues a title commitment, just like a mortgage commitment, a long title document that has did a name search and a property search, and it's going to have, if you have a buyer with a common name like Joe Smith, there's going to be a million judgments against Joe Smith on there. Your buyer is going to need to look at all those judgments and say, none of them belong to me. Now, usually the title company is very good at saying, hey, buyer, you need to look at this and tell me that none of these are your judgments. And if any of them are, we need to fix that prior to settlement. So just make sure that that's happening in the background. Trust your title company, but make sure you're emailing, again, once a week, emailing the lender, the title company, the buyer, and I will email the listing agent as well, checking in. How's the deal going? Do you need anything outstanding from either side that we can take care of? So that way, if the title company forgot to do the judgment search for some weird reason and you're a week before closing, you can look back and say, oh, well, I asked you every single week, is there anything outstanding? And you either didn't answer me or you said, we're all good, we're set for our closing. At this point, the lender and the title company are now communicating. So the lender and the title company are in direct communication. Both of them hired technically by your buyer, and the buyer's lender and the title company are communicating on the numbers. How much is being escrowed for homeowners insurance, for taxes, what's the blah, 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 all of that stuff. All of those numbers are communicated between the lender and the title company, not you as the agent. At this point, if my buyers are asking me for closing costs, estimates, that kind of thing, I'm directing them to the lender. I'm not going to give them an estimate anymore because I'm going to be real ballpark. Once we're getting a week or two from closing, you can get pretty accurate numbers from the lender and the title company at this point. So, again, we're really just the firefighter at this point. If there's any issues, it's going to fall on you. You're going to be the one that needs to problem solve and to get your buyer or your seller, or whatever, through it, get to the closing table. And that is really it for step 10 for financing, appraisal, and title. The next video is on the ground. HOA. There's an optional HOA, and then we have utilities and settlement. And I'll see you on the next one.